district.
Yeah. It's not Senator
Jim
Jim's
right down the street from BTC.
All right, welcome to Set in Education. It is Wednesday, March 16th at 1:34 in the afternoon. And we have with us today Maureen Hebert, the Associate Dean of Workforce Development at Vermont Technical College. And we're looking at S-284, which passed out of Natural Resources and Energy, is in Senate Appropriations. And I'm not sure if Daphne's given everyone just a copy of the bill.
We got it.
Do we? Okay, good. Some of the questions we have around this is we are making a big investment in weatherization. We're continuing our investment in weatherization, and I'll even broaden it in the realm of climate, making certain that we're doing as much as we possibly can to reduce our fossil fuel footprint. Thank you, and etc. So as we continue to invest in this workforce, we want to make sure that we're not missing something. In other words, we want all this work done. We want to make sure we have the workforce to do this work. And a lot of that will fall to folks at Vermont Tech, Community College of Vermont, some of our career technical schools. So just wondering if you might help us start to talk about some of these things and some of the work that might be happening already at Vermont Tech or other institutions that you know of that will really give young people or old people or people in between, the tools so that they can do this work, and that we're not looking back in a couple of years saying, oh geez, we made this investment, but we really could never get the work done because we never could find the people who were trained. So if that's helpful, Ms. Hubert, we'll give the floor to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here today. I work with continuing ed and workforce development at Vermont Tech, and we serve 3,200 Vermonters annually statewide. And this is across sectors, but one of the areas we've been focusing on is green trainings, apprenticeship type programs, offering more options through our CTE centers and partnering with other organizations. So of recent, we've been working very closely with Vermont Adult Learning to bring solar installer training to the Rutland area, the Energy Action Network, the Office of Economic Opportunity, Vermont Works for Women, to offer more options beyond their general construction program for their participants to get licensure or specialty licensure. We work with the Energy Futures Group, VEIC Efficiency Vermont. We've been partnering with the National Guard to be able to offer training and industry recognized credentials for their Guard members, so they have options when they're not working with the Guard in terms of career trajectory and high wage, high growth occupations. We are very much working with corrections, and that's why we were looking at some sort of mobile unit that not only could serve the CTE statewide, but also their facilities as well, to provide industry recognized credentials and other types of certifications and licensure at their facilities. So upon release, they have positions ready and waiting. With the CTEs, we work with the Career and Tech Ed teacher licensure program. And this is basically an apprenticeship type program that provides subject matter experts the opportunity to become teachers within the CTEs. It's an innovative model, but it allows for those experts in their field to bring that form of education to students so they can learn more about career options. And this includes the high school population as well as the adult learners that they work with. And I participate quite regularly on their community learning needs assessment process. And this is one area that they've been talking about a lot. But not all CTES centers have this type of program. So that mobile lab will allow us to expand their offerings. So at Vermont Tech, I don't know if you saw the flyer that I submitted for review, but we have courses across the board, everything from plumbing apprenticeship, electrical apprenticeship, which the first 2 years of both programs provide resources for specialty licensure, and solar, hot water, heating installation, and you can sit for those exams after your first year in those programs. The HVAC program has a stepped model where there's a variety of options. You can start at the entry level and then do the more advanced training. We also offer lead training, Building Performance Institute training, solar installer, a variety of safety programs, certified indoor air quality manager. And all of these are stackable to our other programs like architectural and building engineering technology, which is an associate's through bachelor's degree, electrical engineering technology, general engineering technology, which is a more innovative associate's degree program for people that are looking to enter the sector, that are adults that want a more flexible pathway. We also have a civil and environmental engineering program, a renewable energy program, and electromechanical engineering. Our construction management program probably is well known to you all, but it's an associate's to bachelor's offering. So we're trying to provide stackable credentials, embedded credentials. So when someone graduates from a program, they have other options to continue on that career trajectory. And I'd like to share with you some of the work that IREC has done nationally around climate control and career sector mapping in this sector. And that's something that's been relatively new, but what we're aspiring to give individuals options for training. And I can put that in the chat if that's helpful.
Oh, sure. Maybe actually that might not be the way to do it. Would you mind emailing it to our committee assistant? That's probably the best way. And then she can email right to us.
Absolutely.
Thanks. And would you mind mentioning, what is IRAC?
So IRAC is the, I always
Interstate
forget this
Renewable
acronym. Hold on one second.
Now going to adjourn.
It's the Interstate Renewable Energy Council.
Yes, thank you. I had this up so I could answer that question and I couldn't find it.
I used to be on the board.
Oh, you know. There you go.
In at least one time.
And basically something we're aspiring to is to get high school students, individuals that are looking for career change, individuals, specialty populations like New Americans, English language learners, opportunities to get into this field. So there's a lot of work to be done on career paths, because I think that's the way you sell this type of work, is to show someone where they can start and what their options are in terms of professional growth.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hebert, for being here, and thanks for all the work you're doing. I really appreciate UCC and all that the institution has done over the years. My question is, I appreciate the training and the introductions. How is your communication going with the people who need these workers?
So currently, we are working with plumbers and electricians around the state, and there's about almost 700 students, which represents about 200 employers. And that program has been an ongoing program for many years. So we've been able to develop those relationships. We have an advisory board of employers that are represented. We work closely with the individual groups that I was mentioning that also all work with employers that are feeding into what are the job needs. This sector happens to be, according to Department of Labor and ONET, a really high growth area nationally. So we do know that there are lots of employers that are looking for these skilled positions, but they also have options for growth. And that's where that IRAC career map is really helpful, because you can show, you can start here, but there's lots of choices for advancement.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank Ms. Herbert. I know that VTC has really good placement records, so that's an opening to let you brag about that. But then also, if the placement in the renewable energy, clean energy fields is just as high as, I mean, I know it's probably high throughout all the programs, but I didn't know if this has been particular more or less successful than other placement
Actually, we have close to 100% job placement rate. Sometimes we have students that will step out and do either a graduate program or other education. So that's the only reason it's not quite 100%. But what's interesting of late is that we've been honored by by Georgetown as #1 in the state for return on investment. So if you take any of the programs at Vermont Tech, you're going to have an excellent return on your investment and any kind of reduced debt ratio after you complete the program. And we're #7 in the nation.
Congratulations.
Well, that's great.
Yes.
So speaking of debt, what kind of financial aid do you offer, especially for people who are wanting to come back, or as you mentioned, those people who are in a particular field that may want to do some training so that they can become teachers?
Yeah, so the current Tech Ed teacher licensure program happens to be funded by Perkins, which is a federal grant. So that is supported. If they do any kind of professional development outside of that program, typically the school districts will help support that. For our industry recognized credentials, we work really closely with VSAC, particularly through the advancement grant and the Curtis Fund. But my understanding is there's some interest in expanding that to specifically looking at trades attainment. We also work really closely with the McClure Foundation, and they had supported us through their Best Bets Fund this past year for plumbing and electrical. But if an apprentice is taking one of our programs, typically their employer pays the cost. So the plumbing and electrical program is $1,000 per year for 4 years. So a total of $4,000 plus books. So it's pretty cost effective. In some cases, individuals need additional assistance like access to a laptop, and we have loaners that are available for students.
Okay.
Do their employers pay them while they're in the classroom part as well?
Yes, that's what's so great about the apprenticeship model. It's a learn to earn model. So you are taking the classes while you're also getting a salary. And we provide the training in a more flexible format. So they only have to go to class 2 nights a week for a few months. So when I say it's a 4-year program, it's really November to March, 2 nights a week. And then they have a Canvas site, which is our online educational system for additional resources. So they can access that from home.
So all the hands-on is done on their job, and the VTC work is just done remotely.
Well, we utilize Zoom as well. So it is live in-person training.
Yeah.
And why we moved to that format was primarily because of COVID. Had we kept in-person classes, we would have had to cancel quite a few. But we also surveyed our students and employers, and they preferred that model because often we will have apprentices that are working, say, in Waterbury. They live in, say, Chittenden County, but their classroom was based in Randolph. So it was really difficult for them to navigate and get to the class in time. So this allows them to basically work on the class from where they're at that particular day.
Ms. Hubert, would you say something, the language we're looking at mentions students in grades 5 through 12 with career pathways. Would you mind, I'm sorry if I missed this, say something about how you're working with kids that young?
Yeah, so we actually do a lot of camps and career exploration opportunities. And again, we've been working with the CTE centers and instructors. We work with agencies like VTrans to offer STEM-based education. And this NSTI camp that I want to highlight in particular, it's the National Summer Transportation Institute. And that program looks at all aspects of transportation, of energy management, climate issues, a variety of subjects around STEM, design and engineering. And that is a 1 1-week camp for younger kids in middle school. And then we have an evening or a overnight camp that is offered for high school students. We also work closely with Vermont Works for Women to provide Rosie Girls opportunities on our campus. And we've done other types of camps that are around STEM, engineering, and environmental issues. And we have partnered with the Governor's Institutes too. But we'd like to expand that. So what we found is the best way to get to students is to put the show on the road. So we've worked with Generator. We've worked directly with school districts to provide solar installer mini sessions so they can understand how the technology works, where we've had our faculty or our instructors go to a site to do demonstrations. And we have a program actually coming up with Spalding in April, which will be a Central Vermont opportunity. We also work with Vermont Works for Women to host Women Can Do on our site in Randolph, and hopefully that's starting up again this fall in person.
So I have a CTE center in Bennington. How do you work with them in terms of, so let's think about weatherization, for example. And I don't know if they have a weatherization program, but is this something, we know, again, we're making this big investment. We need young people, all sorts of folks from around the state. How would that match sort of happen? Are you looking for areas where you know that there might not be a certain number of people to do the work, and then you call the director and you go down and offer classes? How does that work?
Yeah, well, I work closely with VACTED, which is the Vermont Association of Current Tech Ed Directors.
Right.
So if they have a particular need, like just today, I was talking to Jody Emerson, who's the Tech Center Director in Barrie, and we were talking about particular needs that they have. So we kind of move around the state. We do have a campus in Bennington, and we've partnered with CCV in Brattleboro and have a campus that's co-located there. If there's an interest, and I know a lot of the CTE centers have natural resources programs, which this would fit nicely with that program. We are hoping to expand what we offer. I have not done a lot of work with Bennington in particular, just because they haven't reached out to us and we haven't found a niche yet for them, but we could do that. Most of the work that we've been doing has been in Rutland, at Stafford. We work very closely with Burlington Tech Center, Central Vermont Tech Center, Randolph, obviously, and Springfield, which is River Valley Tech. We've worked closely with Newport. So out of the 17 CTE sites, I'd say we work pretty regularly with maybe 14 of them.
May I ask you to reach out to Bennington?
Yeah.
That'd be great. Mike Nolan, and he's a great guy, and if you wouldn't mind, then maybe just loop back to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have that, yeah. Sounds like all the money's going to Rutland.
That's right.
As usual.
As well.
Oh, we'd love to spread it around.
That'd be great for us to get some of the Rutland money down our
We
way.
can work together.
Just keep the
Absolutely.
Williston money.
Well, of course, we have to keep the Williston.
And keep
Yeah.
the South Burlington motivated.
Yeah, no, that would be helpful. And your great point. I mean, it's incredible right now, the shortage of all sorts of folks in all sorts of fields. Healthcare center, Lions knows that quite well. Plumbers, electricians, and weatherization, all those folks we're going to continue to need. And they're really great careers. They're really exciting, great careers. And sometimes they don't take 2 years to get started. They may take 3 or 4 classes to really be able to then go out on the road. And it's real. Also, John Dewey's learning by doing. Go and apprentice and get your hands right in the thick of it. Yeah. So did you ask for this amount? So we're going to be asked to loop to appropriations. This is your request. Any final comments or questions from you on this, Ms. Hebert? These $2 amounts?
Yeah, I think what ultimately this will allow us to do is to build capacity to expand these offerings to other parts of the state that just haven't had the resources or the expertise to deliver this. What I think has been great about Vermont Tech and the groups that we work with is sort of convening and finding the space to be collaborative. And ultimately, the only way these are going to work is if we collaborate and work together. I tend to like to work with the willing. It's a much smoother process. So this will allow us the space to do that. Oftentimes there's interest in a project, but there isn't the people power, isn't the funding, it maybe isn't the equipment to be able to even run the training. So it's not as effective. So I think that's what this goal is for this particular funding.
Great. Anything else from Ms. Heber? Any questions? Yes, center lines, please.
And just as you're working through all of this, I mean, you're doing a great deal of amazing work, and it's so critically important. But I guess the question that I would have is, how are you sort of ensuring that once folks are trained, that they're moving across the state to places where we need that workforce? Do you do anything in that way in terms of advising students or connecting them with jobs going forward?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, the career services office is in my department. So the woman that is the director of that program, her office is right next to mine. So we work very closely and collaboratively on not only on finding employer partners to come in and talk to students, but posting available jobs, internships, work-based learning opportunities. And we actually have a virtual fair that's running right now for students to be able to meet with employers. And we're hoping to do some more in-person opportunities. We have a construction one that's coming up fairly soon. So that is one of our primary objectives, is if someone doesn't have a placement or an employer that they're working with, we work to find that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Heber. Any other questions for Ms. Heber? Okay. Thanks so much for joining us. Great to see you.
Thank you so much.
And I appreciate you reaching out to the Mike Nolan down there, and you and I can touch base. Great.
Absolutely. Thank
All right.
you. Take
Have a great
care.
afternoon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Such a pretty picture.
It's a piece.
Yeah, the whale's tail.
Yeah, with the sun setting.
Very nice.
Yes.
They had the group up from Randolph, South Burlington, South Burlington just didn't look very good.
No, exactly.
You didn't have anything to put on the postcards.
Yeah, they were like, we had a shooting at our mall.
That's not Burlington. Now, the BTC is in Williston. You can see Mount Mansfield.
Yeah.
But they used to be in Randolph.
Yeah,
Or
they
the
used to.
VTC.
Well,
That's right.
BTC is still
Still,
Yeah, but the whale
the main
tails
camp.
went to
Yeah,
help
But the
South Burlington.
whales tails are in Randolph, right?
Yeah,
no.
Randolph or VTC or Randolph Center is.
And did they get moved? Did
Yeah,
they?
up
Yeah,
to
they
South Burlington.
moved from yours.
No, they moved
No.
from Randolph,
Randolph to
Burlington.
South Burlington.
but still along the 89, just on the other side of the
Oh,
street.
okay.
And there's a nice
All right, I
walking
thought there
trail.
were two.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, I've never walked it.
River Dawes, little bridge.
Your area?
If you get your
Okay.
exit, well, don't.
Yeah,
go
but I usually
through
just
the
let it go
way-
because it's, look at this and it's not,
You know, I mean,
it's not significant. And
Yeah.
I know
But
what
the
you're
exit would be
doing.
a little
I've been
further.
through the whole
yeah, no, I think.
federal rules versus state rules.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
I'm good with it.
Committee, any concerns or questions about these dollars? Folks will ask us. Okay, great, thank you.
I mean, I guess the,
Go ahead.
is this overall, I mean, I guess this isn't our request, this is the bill. that
This is a
somebody
bill
else
that, yeah, they
Yeah,
would,
it's touched on a lot of
Yeah.
committees.
we just wanted to make sure, yeah, I just wanted to make sure we had a look at it before.
At one point, I remember just from the prior years where
Oh,
different funding environment than the federal money, where they said like, well, education kind of has like this much money
Yeah,
to deal with, so I didn't know if this was like.
no, this is just, we'll have Dan in next week to talk a little bit more about that, but this is just natural resources stab at trying to work on workforce development with weatherization. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Okay. So,
Interesting that they're talking about, the same thing we've been talking about, people who have expertise in certain areas going into teach,
yeah,
like it's a new concept. It's happened for years.
so committee, Senator Cummings received an email from a new constituent, a relatively new constituent, and also a constituent of Senator Perkins.
I also received an
You
email, I
received,
realized.
I'll just read part of it. My husband and I are new constituents of yours. We recently moved from Seattle, Washington to Northfield. My husband has a technology startup, blah, blah, blah. I homeschool our children. Their concern is they're writing to ask if we can better understand homeschool students and whether or not they have equal access to special ed services through their local districts, how they get those services, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So it's not something that I, for one, am not fluent in, maybe others are. So what I told Senator Cummings and Senator Perks we do is take a look at it. So we have Ms. Kelleher, Ms. Sperry, and Ms. Hanrahan, all of whom I think have been in with us before and have had their names butchered by me. I apologize. And so with that, I think what we'll do is the three of you know the issue that we're dealing with. Jackie, maybe you're the first on the list. You want to say a few words? You're the Director of Special Education for AOE.
Yes, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. We figured that you would have some questions, but thank you. We did receive the email, and let me first clarify by saying that the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, it has a term called parentally placed private school students, and that districts have an obligation to put aside some funding to be able to support students with disabilities of families who parentally place their children in private schools. Now, it's up to states whether homeschool students are considered in that category. In Vermont, we do. So kids who are receiving home instruction are considered being under that parentally placed private school category. And states vary in terms of how much IDEA funding is set aside to provide services to students with disabilities in private school and homeschool setting. In fact, in many states, it's just for private school students, period. The money is, it's about giving equitable services. The money is limited, but students need to be considered to receive equitable services, and equitable services are similar to what the student would receive in an IEP, but how often there are fewer services available than what a child would receive at a public school. So the district's obligation is to provide a free, appropriate public education in their public school, and the parent has the right to refuse, but then the student is no longer eligible for an individualized education program, an IEP at that point. But they are eligible for what's called a services plan after meaningful consultation is done between the district, and in this case, the family. They would, identify what needs could be met. But essentially the IDEA says that no parentally placed private school child with a disability has the individual right to receive some or all of the special ed and related services that the child would receive if enrolled in a public school. So we have Alicia, who manages our home instruction students and works with the families. And then Jen Perry has the finance side. And I don't know how in the weeds you want to go, but there's a concept called proportionate share. And that's the monies that we're talking about that a school has to set aside as part of the IDEA. And, there's some very specific details with prop share. But essentially, I think what that parent is asking is that the services that the school is offering and the amount of service, the type of service, that's going to be, based on that consultation, and the district is not obligated to provide for everything and has a fair amount of discretion on how much money gets allocated across all of the parentally placed private or homeschool students within their districts. States can choose to provide additional special ed and related services for homeschool kids, but that's at the state level too, and that's also something that we can discuss as well. So I just, Jen or Alicia, do you want to weigh in? I just wanted to give the broad context.
Let me just start before moving to another witness. So what proportion, districts have to leave a portion of the money aside. So what percentage does that look like? Or is it that general?
It's go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm going to butt in. This is Jennifer. Thank you for having me. It's not general. It's it's up to the LEA to report how many students within their towns and their districts are receiving an IDEA service plan. And this is kind of the back end of the whole proportionate share process. And once that LEA, the SU, determines how many students in their LEA have a IDEA service plan, that number is divisible to the amount of IEP students or eligible students within that SU. So most SU/LEA have a very small amount of required IDEA funds that are put towards that proportionate share amount.
So is it accurate that some students that are in homeschool situations may get the services they need from special ed, the special ed services, and others may not? Is that how you would describe it?
The way I would describe it is it goes back to the child find and the child count collection, and that's how the whole process begins. The funding that is required to be set aside for IDEA comes further in the process. It is a potential that you have a student in a district or an SU that requires more services, and that funding may not be a 50-50 between two students. It may be a 60-40, and it may not even go to direct services for that student. It may go toward that LEA to assist in other areas that are tied to that whole prop share process.
So maybe, and then I'll kind of center first, like, just to back up. So if you're homeschooled, you are not guaranteed to receive the special education services like other students. That's accurate. Okay. So there is that difference right now that exists in the state. Okay. And that would be determined by the number, whether or not the students might get something is determined by the amount of students that need something divided by the amount of money that's being set aside for those students.
Correct. It's also based on that meaningful consultation. IDEA doesn't require the LEA to spend proportionate share only for direct services. And I think your constituent was asking specifically about related services. But rather through the consultation process, a determination must be made about how the available amount of funds will be utilized, so that these kids benefit from the services offered. But depending on the discussion, it could be indirect services, and based on the amount of funds to expend on these kids, the district has the right to do indirect, which could be things like consultation services, equipment, or materials. So it really depends on what that meaningful consultation contains, and the amount of funds that are available to be dispersed throughout the district for all kids eligible as homeschoolers or parentally placed independent school families.
Senator Person.
Yeah, thank you for this information. So there is really no difference in these programs between a homeschooler and a private place student, or a place, but a student going to a private school or an independent approved school, as we call them, right?
That's in Vermont, we consider homeschool students to meet the same criteria as a parentally placed private or independent school family.
Right. And so then they might have that money that was reserved that we talked about if they go to their superintendent, their SU. And is that on first come, first served basis? Kind of like, how do you decide? Are you less, as a parent, less likely to get those services or that money if you come later in the school year than earlier?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that Jen might be able to speak to from the finance side, but for each year, so annually, and it's also based on like the previous year's number. I think that's important to note as well. That the amount of prop share money they have to spend is based upon eligible students from the last year, and any significant increase in the number of eligible students this year would likely not have enough money to secure services for all students. So I think you're spot on with, you know, when the money is gone, you have to wait for the next year.
Right.
Ms. Perry, did you want to add something?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said Terry. I didn't hear that correctly. Jackie
Sure.
is spot on. The amount of funds that are required to be set aside are from last December, the prior December numbers. And so oftentimes a student that was eligible for this set aside for that prior December, we ran into this with COVID, went back to public school the next year because they were taken out for home studies. So we as a team, and that's why all three of us are here, is we work together because a lot of the SUs with the big jump of home study over COVID ran into this issue and had a lot of questions. So we tried to work together. Thank you, Jackie.
Yes.
One other question is, so what is your advice to these families, these homeschooling families, if they run into this? Is the advice go enroll your child into a school so you can get the full service? Is that, I mean, I don't want to be light of that, but that seems like that would be the advice if they could do that. They might have reasons why they can't, but is that basically what you need to tell them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's like, you know, if they are to receive the special ed and related services that child needs to have those rights and protections, you know, IDEA applies to publicly placed children with disabilities who are found eligible. And but, you know, there are other homeschool families that, you know, even though we're saying that the funding doesn't have to be distributed evenly and no individual child has an individual right to it, there's a lot to be said about reaching out to your school district and engage in that meaningful consultation, and that there is benefit. And so I think it's also an awareness that this you know, opportunity is available to families, but they're not going to receive likely all of the services and supports to meet those needs.
And the other piece I want to bring to light, Jackie, coupled with what Jackie mentioned, is the SUs are required to publicly announce that they're having this meaningful consultation. So if they're publicly announcing in a newsletter, in the newspaper, online, on their Facebook page, or on their internal website, or not internal, but the public website, they are required to make their public in their districts aware that they are performing these meaningful consultation meetings. And that's a great place to start when you're making a recommendation to a parent that has a parentally placed student or a home study student.
Yeah, and one final note, some states do go beyond the bare minimum mandated by IDEA and require public schools to use state funding to provide services to students with disabilities who are in homeschools. So that's just a point too, is that, you know, some families look to what can the state do in terms of its state allocations. And also LEAs may choose to, on their own, use their money to provide additional supports. But again, it's at their discretion and, you know, there's no requirement to do so.
Based on federal policy. Senator Hooker.
Thank you. So you have students that you're relying on the previous year's numbers, and say a family moves in. Do those students who have received funding the previous year get first dibs, or do they have to apply again and have the money dispersed based on, you know, the new families that are coming?
First, I want to say I apologize for not being clear. Even though those students were counted that prior year, it doesn't mean that those students are getting the funding. So if those 3 or 5 or 10 students are counted again this year, it doesn't mean that those 3 to 5 or 10 students are going to get partial funding for direct services. So I apologize for not making that clear. That's how the IDEA requires the LEAs to set aside their SUs, to set aside their funds. So if you had 10 kids one year, their assumption is that you may have 10 or around 10 the next year. So that's just the way that IDEA requires us to require the SU to set aside that amount of money.
Yeah, and those children are receiving individualized service plans. And so those service plans are consulted on each year annually to find out what type of supports can be offered.
Does the agency of, Senator Hooker, you finished? Sorry. Does the Agency of Education think that we need to advance a policy on this? In other words, become more proactive? And this might not be something you're ready to answer at this point, but it sounds like we're doing what the feds are telling us to do. With maybe a little flexibility. It doesn't sound as though the Agency of Education is looking for us to do more. I don't mean to put you on the spot. It's
no,
something.
Not at all. I'm just wondering if Alicia might be able, because Alicia works with our homeschool families. And so, and I can say from our end, we make a lot of those recommendations based on the data that we, you know, collect on an ongoing basis. And from the special ed side, we do not have a lot of families in homes, in home instruction calling about this. I think we can be more active in publicizing this on our end to all families and working with our districts to do so. But Alicia might know more about the needs of home instruction families.
Please.
So good afternoon. Thanks for letting me take the opportunity to give you a little bit of information about home study. So, you know, I don't think that the agency right now has any opinion necessarily on whether or not we should be kind of going above and beyond IDEA. I think in the last 2 years, especially during the pandemic, we've had certainly a huge increase in families who have decided that they want to homeschool their kids. And a lot of them kind of come to us and not understanding that when they enroll in a home study program, that their right to a free and appropriate public education goes away. So we've had to do a little bit of kind of background work. We've had to provide some information to families just to say, you know, if you want to have some of these services, then you need to really go to your school district and ask for them with the understanding that there's no guarantee that there's going to be anything that they can do. You know, some schools have been really great about including students in, you know, reading groups or speech and language groups and things like that. And other schools have said, you know, we've already provided other students, or we've provided professional development, or we've used up all of our money, and it's not really an option right now. So there's definitely some education I think that can go out there, especially for more families who are unfamiliar with home study and what the requirements are. But in terms of state statute for home study, we really don't say much about special education. We require families who have kids with disabilities to provide a list of adaptations, which is essentially, you know, what do kids need to be successful? So if a student has a math disability, then they might say, well, we're going to use manipulatives, or we're going to use flashcards, or we're going to use a calculator, or things like that to support our student with a math disability. So we can provide some of that information to families, but it's really based on what their program is going to look like and what their student's disability is, in terms of what types of adaptations that they want to provide that makes their kids successful. Does that help?
It does. Sometimes homeschool students go to campus for sports, I believe. Are there ever opportunities for students to go to campuses for special education services?
So yes, kids are certainly allowed any extracurricular activities. That's a definite. Other kids, if a family can do what we've kind of called a hybrid type home study program, where students can attend their local public school for 2 out of their 5 core classes. So again, if a student had a math disability and wanted to attend a geometry class at the high school, but really needed some instruction to be able to access that geometry class, then they might be given some instruction and that would be most likely through a services plan. So they can still get some instruction if they need it to access. And that would be, you know, how often that happens certainly would be more of a team decision. But if the student was going for PE and science and health class, let's say, actually that's not a great example, but if they're going to school for, say, math and PE, and the student had a reading disability, then if they don't need, they may not need instruction for that math class. They don't need the instruction for math, but they may not need specific instruction in reading to be able to access that math class. So the answer is yes and no. It really kind of depends on each individual student.
Right.
Yeah, but that's helpful. It sounds like that there's some options there. Sounds, yeah. Senator Pertwee.
Yeah, a follow up on that. So if there is a student doing that hybrid approach, where they're 2 days at their local public school and 3 days at home school, are they considered enrolled in the public school and then therefore do have the guarantee of the services?
So it's actually 2 out of the 5 core classes. It's not necessarily 2 days versus 3 days. So is there a guarantee of services? I think it depends. Again, if a student needs access to a math class, then most likely, yes, there would be some services that would be available.
If they're doing the 2 out of the 5, they're considered enrolled in the public school.
They actually, as long as they have 3 of the core home study classes done at home, then they're considered to be a homeschooled family as opposed to a public school family or student.
But if they do 3 at school and 2 periods at home, then they would be considered a public school student.
So they can't do 3 core courses at school and 2 at home and be considered a home study student. We wouldn't let them be able to be enrolled.
But can they do that? Can they be a public school student and only do part homeschool, but not be enrolled in the homeschool program, but just do three of the core classes at school and 2 at home, or is that just they would just be delinquent for those 2 periods there at home?
Most likely they would be considered delinquent. The way that we have our rules is that they have to have the no more than 2. So they can take as many electives as they want. So as long as reading and writing, math, history, government, and civics, literature, and math are done. Those are the 5 core. But if an older student wants to take PE and health and Spanish and French and culinary at the local school district, they can certainly do that. They're still considered to be a home study student
Right.
because they're not taking more than 2 of their core classes because they're taking all of these electives.
Right. So I was just wondering what it would take for a homeschool to be considered a public school student, like what they have, if they took 3 of those core classes at the school, but still did some homeschooling, would they be considered a public school student?
They would be, yep, they would be considered a public school student, and we would not allow them to be enrolled in home study.
Right. So then those other 2 periods, they'd be delinquent, as we said.
Correct.
Right.
And they would have to have a conversation with their public school about why they were doing it that way.
So I guess my follow-up to that is, could they be placed in partial homeschool study by the school as part of an approved IEP? Like for this student, it would be good if these 2 periods were done at home or something. Could there be a school placement where they actually place them in home study? Is that ever done?
I don't think that's ever been done. The only way I could see that might happen is if the student was considered homebound, and that would most likely be because of their disabilities. But we would not, the school could certainly say to the parent, we think that you ought to homeschool your kid. I would hope that wouldn't happen, but that's certainly an option. But to say to them, you can come to these 3 classes, but the others have to be done at home.
Yeah.
Through home study, that's not an option.
And the districts have an
If I may, 1 second, if I may, the personalized learning plans, is there a way to do it through those? Where you take 3 classes and then the other 2 classes, it might be that you're working on a research paper at home or apprenticing somebody online, something like that. Is that possible?
That would probably be more of an independent study through the school.
Okay.
So a PLP could not include a couple of classes for home study at home.
Yeah.
Ms. Kelleher, I apologize for interrupting.
Oh, no, thank you. I'm enjoying the conversation. It's just another reminder, though, our school districts who are, determining eligibility for this IEP, which is offered to public school students, they have to determine that the student is educated in the least restrictive environment to every extent appropriate, that they're educated with their, same age peers without disabilities. I mean, that's like, they've got it, those are the things that they need to consider. And it's to the greatest extent possible that child is in the general ed classroom 80% or more during the day. So having a homeschool as an option, as Alicia was saying, it's rare, it's infrequent, but we do have like homebound options. But there's typically a medical condition or a debilitating condition that is preventing access to the gen ed programs the school offers. So there are some tight requirements about who qualifies for that.
And you're in contact with the family that Senator Cummings and Senator Persilic received an email from in Northfield? Are you working with that family? No.
No, I received this from our deputy secretary to come talk to you about. But we're here for all families. We have our 24/7 TA line, where we also advise that if this is not happening, if you have not had meaningful consultation with your school, you can also use the administrative state complaint process. That is does also impact homeschooled students who are not getting that consultation or that service plan.
Alicia, might we ask you to reach out to this family? And you have their, is that okay with you, Senator?
Yeah.
Just reach out to this family. I think they would greatly appreciate it. And then maybe you could just loop back to us and just let us know informally, the committee, whether or not anything was able to be resolved, or is there anything that you, in your opinion, believe we can or should be doing to help families like this? That would be helpful to us. If you don't mind doing that, I know you're.
Yep. I'm happy to do that.
That'd be great. Senator Hooker.
Thank you. So you mentioned that it's incumbent upon the school districts to publicize the, the meetings. And I'm just wondering, I mean, we're in the middle of the school year. When does that happen? Is that something that is ongoing through newsletters, through information that goes home? Or does it happen at the beginning of the year before the school year starts? So that somebody like this family coming in the middle is kind of at a loss as to where to go to find out the information that they need.
Sure, there are no requirements of when it happens, but that it happens. All districts are responsible for child find. That's, locate, identify, and evaluate the child. That happens throughout the year. And then for meaningful consultation, it's typically done near the beginning of the school year for back to school to identify what services and supports are needed. Sometimes it happens over the summer. And these meaningful consultation, evidence the district needs to maintain. And it's something that we look for when we're monitoring districts or when we're auditing districts for their compliance with requirements. So it's not a mandate of when, but that.
Okay. So I would assume that some of this is on like websites that the school has. I don't know what you do to make sure that it happens, but is that a possibility to say to the districts, put it up on your website so that when a new family moves in and they have these special needs, that they can see where they can go to get information.
Yeah, the districts are very creative with how they message their services and their offerings. I mean, they're posting flyers at pediatrician offices. There are backpack flyers, libraries, putting on local news stations, different commercials. So there's different ways that they do, and they do a good job of outreach in multiple media. But we always recommend that they post as much as possible, materials for families on their website. That also isn't in our jurisdiction as of yet to mandate.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Alicia, thank you so much for reaching out to this family. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach back out to us, and we'll look forward to hearing from you maybe next week to see if there's any kind of follow-up or anything that we can do at our end. And it's Senator Perschlick's constituent, so in particular, if you have an opportunity just to update him as well. Thank you all for everything you do. I know we'll be having you back in this committee as we dig into some other related information in, I think it's H716. With that, we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. So yeah, we'll see what she has to say after she reaches out to the
And
family.
I told the family, so you can watch, the hearing's gonna happen today, so you might want to watch it on
Yeah,
YouTube
yeah.
tonight.
Great.
And I was gonna check in with them after.
Okay, great. So you'll let us know. What else,
It
if
does
there's
kind of get
anything else.
lost.
Yeah. Let's
I-
take 5
I haven't
minutes. We're
seen
gonna have Ms. St. James come in and talk to us